Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're going to continue on with Look Out on Parenting Here, a survival guide for the single parent, a book that has been written by my friend Ted Moss III. Today we're going to be talking about tips 12 through 15, but before we do that, we're just going to jump right into it, folks. We're going to go right into what we talked about last time. So today we're doing 12 through 15. That means last time we talked about 9 through 12, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think that sounds about right. So the first tip we talked about last time was enjoying each other. What does this mean? This means ultimately what I took from this chapter, from this tip, was that your kids are not going to be a chore. Don't ever look at hanging out with your kids, spending time with your kids like they're a chore, like it's any other activity, because ultimately it's not like any other activity. This every moment is special because your time with them is going to be limited. Limited in the fact that someday you're going to prepare them for release. We're going to talk about that today, actually. So your time is very limited. Don't treat it as a chore. Second tip we talked about was being in the moment. So whenever you are spending time with your children, with your toddlers, be in that moment. Be focused in. It's so hard for adults to be focused, and I am definitely guilty of this, where I'm always thinking about what I did in the past, how I can correct it or do better, and then I'm thinking about what I need to be planning for in the future. It's almost like I have no time in the present. Children, and I can kind of speak to this I think Ted was onto something here. Children tend to just focus right on the present. They don't have the responsibilities to plan things for the future, and they're not really thinking about the past, because as a parent you should be kind of thinking about those things for them, at that age. And then yes, eventually they'll grow older and start to think about those different like time capsules of time that they're moving through, but children are just focused on the present. So when you're with your children, focus in on them. Enjoy your time, hearkening back to the first tip that we just talked about, that first bullet point. Third, listen carefully. You never want to, like, in comedy, and Ted'll tell you this too, you never want to step on the laughs. You need to give the audience a chance to laugh. And it's kind of like the same thing with your kids. You need to give them a chance to share their perspective, and you don't want to tell them that they're wrong in their perspective. Like if you ask your child, like, hey, why is the sky blue? Well, the sky's blue because, or this is like your child will tell you, oh, the sky's blue because, I don't know, that when the sun comes out in the sky, it's sky blue. Mr. Sun paints the whole sky blue. You just listen to what they say, and they're going to share with you some interesting perspectives on how they view the world. And don't trample on these ideas. Yeah, okay, maybe the sun doesn't have a paintbrush and paints the sky blue, but you have to give them a chance to believe that, and let their imaginations run. Let them run with their imaginations, basically. Lastly, last time we talked about valuing your relationship. And instead of just waiting for like the big events, to spend time with them or to show appreciation for them, tell them at some like really random times. Like one night when you're tucking them in bed, tell your son or daughter, hey, you're one of the best kids any parent can have. Right? You don't have to wait for the birthday or for the Christmas. Tell them when you tell them at those random moments. I think it's more genuine because they're not really anticipating it. And the other thing Ted talked about here is you never want to blame your children for the situation that they are in. You know, you never want, like, maybe a child wasn't planned, right? Don't blame the child for that. That's not their fault. They came into this world, they had no say in it, right? So you got to be careful with that, not blaming your child. And just value that relationship. It's a special relationship. It's going to be different than the one you have with your friends, and it'll be different than the one you have with your parents. So value that relationship. Today, we're going to be talking about tip number 12. We're going to start off with tip number 12, setting a good example. Ted starts off here talking about how you have to be careful in criticizing the behavior of your toddler without looking at your behavior first. And we've discussed behavior in some of the earlier tips, creating structure. What else did we talk about? Being consistent, and talking about how the behaviors that you tolerate in private are going to be the ones that are shown in public too. Right? If you're going to punish behaviors, make sure you do it privately and then in publicly too. But see, if your toddler is behaving in a certain way, look to yourself first. See if you're behaving in that certain manner and your kids are just kind of imitating you. That's why Ted advocated here for you have to be on your best behavior. And remember when we talked about taking off our shoes when we come inside the house, because your children are going to look to you for that example. If they don't see you doing it, they're going to think, well, why should I be doing it? Right? And then you end up getting in a fight with your kids. So be on that best behavior at all time. Kids notice things. You don't want to just do it with your kids, because you never know if they're watching. But also, you want to set that consistency in yourself. The toddlers, and this is something that Ted states in this chapter, the toddler's good behavior begins at home, and it begins with you, always. And I think that's 100% true. If you want them to behave out in public, out in school, out in the grocery store, when you go over your parents' house, it starts at home. And how are you behaving at home? How are you behaving when you think that your children aren't watching? Remember, you got to be consistent, even if they're whether they're watching or whether they're not watching. Because even if you don't think they're watching, maybe they actually are. And all of a sudden, now you've rubbed off on them. So always set a good example. Tip number 12. Next, tip number 13, fostering respect. So there's going to come a time where the discussion is going to have to be raised with the child. Okay, I have set forth some rules for you. I've created structure for you. And when you see other people not doing the things that I told you not to do, so other people are doing them, it's not necessarily wrong. You have to respect the opinions of others, the behaviors of others, because it works for them, right? We're going to do what's best for us, but you have to respect other people. And it's one of the toughest things, I think, for a child to grasp, right? I can't do it, but somebody else can. Because that's immediately what my kind of child brain thinks about, right? But it's going to take time. And I don't know if a toddler is going to do it, but you have to set the seeds in motion when they are a toddler so that when they grow up, that they realize this, that not everything's black and white. People are ever changing. And just because something works for somebody else doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And Ted gives like the example in the book about the Amish, and like his daughter wanted to be Amish because of the horses, but then Ted mentions, well, the Amish also dress in a certain way, and they do a ton of chores, and they don't have electricity. So it's like it's a balancing act that all they see is the good, but they don't see the bad with it. So it's a lifestyle that works for them, but are you willing to do it? I don't know. I don't know, but we respect that lifestyle. That's the thing. We're not making fun of it. We're not judging it, but they are doing what they think is right, what they think is the best. Ultimately, it comes down to this. The child eventually will have to learn that different does not equal bad. Right? Just because something different is different does not mean that it's punishable or that it's bad. And the child is going to have to know the difference between fair and equal. Fair and equal. Can you even define that? Could I even define that? Equal, fair. Well, how would you define those? Fairness, I would say, is you both start at the same starting line, but equal would be like you running the race at both the same speed. I think that's kind of a pretty good allegorical representation there. Let me know what you guys think about that. Fairness, you start at the same starting line, but equal is you run at the same speeds. Yeah. So let me know what you guys think about that. I just made that up on the spot. Lastly, this kind of goes to the Amish example, acknowledging the social and cultural differences among people. So you're going to have to realize people are different. People are going to do things that work best for them and their culture. Respect it. Hopefully they respect yours too. That's the thing. Hopefully they respect yours too. And you just focus on yourself. Let's head to the next tip. Tip number 14. Be a teacher. Ted states in this chapter that being a teacher is really the most basic and fundamental job of being a parent. And I think I would agree with this because you're constantly, you're teaching your child, you're showing your child how to navigate life, you're creating structure for them, you're teaching them life lessons, certain behaviors, teaching them maybe some things about certain school subjects maybe you have a fancy for. It all comes down to being a teacher. And I almost think they kind of coincide one with another, almost. Make sure that Ted talks about here, your accomplishments is from the child's perspective, you're going to be more proud of their accomplishments than your very own accomplishments. And you just want to make sure that you're not stealing the limelight from them. So when they do have a certain achievement, let them shine in it, right? Don't steal the microphone from them when they are at the podium giving their award speech. Like Kanye West did to Taylor Swift, Another allegorical representation there. Just let them toot their horn for them. Be their biggest cheerleader, basically. And then when your child fails, and I was a little confused on. We're going to have to ask Ted about this. When your child fails, Ted talks about taking ownership. And I think when he meant failed, it's when the behaviors that they exhibit don't adhere to your expectations or those expectations set forth between you and the child. So yes, when that happens, you take ownership. Again, you need to look at your behavior first if you don't like the behavior that you see in your child. So I think that's kind of what Ted was getting at here. You're allowed to change the rules as they grow, mature, and change. And I think about it. Teachers, a third grade teacher is going to treat their kids, or how about this? A kindergarten teacher is going to treat their kids maybe a little differently than a high school teacher, right? So as they grow older, the rules are going to change. maybe they're going to loosen. You're going to give them a little more leeway. You're going to let them spend the night, stay out later. You're going to let them use the car in certain situations. They're going to mature. They're going to change. So the rules are going to change. Until finally, I think this is the next tip. Tip number 15 is, preparing for release. What is the real purpose to all this parenting work? And Ted answers this question by saying, well, it's really the purpose is preparing to release them out into the world with the tools that you have given them for surviving and behaving in that world. He talks about in this chapter, eventually your children are going to become their own person. And you're going to need to show them that they're going to need to address the challenges that the world is going to present to them, because you're not always going to be there to help them. Right? And he talks about this quote, "It's harder on me than it is on you." Right? Teaching them or preparing them for release, it's harder on me than it is on you, because I had to basically, kind of like as a parent, you bust your ass to get your kid prepared for that moment. And it's harder on you because you know that you're not always going to be there to protect them, but you want to. But you know that you can't. You know that it's time to let the little baby chicks fly out of the nest. And maybe they might fall, but you have to let them get back up and fly on their own. Else, it's going to be so much harder for them later in life if you're constantly there flying them around all over the place. And I like this little dichotomy here. When you can't be their teacher, be their guide. And when you can't be their guide, help them locate somebody who can be their guide. And when you do that, you're always there to support them and be their parent. Just because somebody else is helping guide them along, maybe, like a coach or maybe one of their grade school subject teachers in school, at the end of the day, you'll always be there to support them. You'll always be there to be their parent. And that's like with me. Ever since I moved out, I still talk to my parents a ton. I ask them lots of advice. I talk to them about certain things. Even though I now have maybe other people to guide me in certain things, maybe, guide me at work on certain, principles with Java or Spring Framework, but they are always there to help me and support me along, tell me, hey, or ask me things like, hey, what are you working on? Or maybe navigate a situation at work that is non-coding related, Parents are really good for that. But guys, that is, let me double check. That was the last, that was the last tip. And this actually brings us to the close of part 1 of Look Out on Parenting here. So the tips 1 through 15. Next week, we're going to talk about part 2. We're going to start on part 2, which is getting through the day. This is going to be a portion where Ted goes into some tips for getting through certain parts of your day, like, getting your children to eat dinner, or getting your children to get up for school in the morning, or picking them up from school, etc., like the little activities. So we'll go into more depth in that starting next week. Guys, if you have any questions, please leave them down below. If you have any other comments, please leave them down below. Like and subscribe to this video. I think we have hit 44 subscribers on YouTube. Oh my gosh. Thank you guys so much. And stay tuned. We've got more coming. Thank you guys so much if you listened this far. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.